Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this community meeting that we're having this evening to talk about the Robert Crown Community Center. There have been lots of questions about the project, and so we thought this was a good opportunity in the cycle of the project to answer people's questions. Because there's been so many questions, what we've done is we've put together a video, and the video has 3 segments. The first segment is about 25 minutes long, talking about operations, talking about the agreements that we're making with outside users, talking about how the center is currently used and how it will be used in the future. The second is a portion talking about the actual center itself. We're going to do a little tour of the facility. And the third is talking about financing, how we're paying for all this. So I've asked the folks that are here, we've got 10 or 15 folks here with us this evening in the council chambers to submit questions in writing. So far I've got one question, and so we'll start with this one question. Please fill in the following with single dollar amounts annually. Operating costs for the ice rinks, the library, the community center, the fields, parks, and storm drains, and the revenue. That is something that we're continuing to work on. We will be back to the City Council before the end of the current fiscal year with the operating costs and the revenue in each of these line items. So at that time, we'll be able to answer that question. Are there any other questions? Kimberly, did we get anything else in writing?
So, Wally, we have a lot of questions, and we'd like to...
Is there anything else in writing?
Wally, we would like to ask her questions.
All right, so let's just go. We've got 3 great videos. Let's roll. In our first segment, we're going to talk about the uses of the Robert Crown Center, both inside and outside, how the center is currently used and how the new center will be used. And I'm joined by the folks that are actually worrying about how we use it today and how we're going to be using it in the future. First is Karen Danzig-Lyons, the director of the Evanston Public Library. Welcome, Karen. Lawrence Hemingway, the director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, and Erica Storley, the assistant city manager who's coordinating the Robert Crown project. Lawrence, let me start with you. So the Robert Crown Center has been with us for many years. Talk a little bit about what are the current uses. If we were to go out today and walk through the center, what would we see happening?
Thank you, Wally. Today, if you walked into the building, you would see quite a bit of activity on the ice. There's currently a full sheet of ice, and there is a studio sheet of ice, which is basically a half sheet of ice. And the activities or programs that you will see on the ice go from hockey to figure skating to speed skating to our dancing on ice and all of our other ice-related activities that are currently going on at the facility. But you'll also see is our DCFS certified preschool taking place daily in the facility. That includes a preschool for 2-year-olds all the way up to 5-year-olds. It also includes after-school activities and an after-school program for kids once they are out of school as well. Then we also have a gymnasium. Unfortunately, because of our certification through DCFS, the gymnasium is not accessible to the general public until after 6 p.m.
So let me stop you right there. So we have the rooms for childcare, but you can't get to the gym because of what?
Because the gym is attached to the preschool, and during preschool hours, you can't have public access to the preschool for security of those.
So that gym sits empty then all day long on weekdays until what, the late afternoon?
That is correct, till approximately 6 p.m. each day.
Okay.
Once we have access to the gym, we do a variety of programs there throughout the week. We do rentals. We have a consistent group who comes in and rents the gym and do indoor soccer. There's some basketball that takes place. We do gymnastics and other martial arts in the space as well. But right now, the way the building is currently configured, those are the primary activities that take place inside the facility.
Mm-hmm. Now, outside, before we started building New Crown, those were soccer fields. Talk a little bit about how those fields were used.
Well, yeah, you had two baseball diamonds, and you had space that allowed us to draw soccer fields on there, and we had a multiple number of soccer fields that were there. But our biggest issue there was drainage. The existing fields didn't drain very well. And once you had any kind of precipitation or rain on the fields, we had to literally wait till they dry out. So it could rain today and we couldn't have access to those fields for another 2 or 3 days because the fields are sloshy and wet and just wasn't very accessible to play upon. And so at the new facility, with our new 3 artificial turf fields, we'll be able to play while it's raining. We'll be able to have immediate access. We won't lose time for our leagues that take place there. And so we're really excited about the opportunity that these new artificial turf fields that will provide us from a playability perspective.
So, current crown, what would you say a reasonable day starts at? You know, ice skaters, I guess, what little I know about ice skaters, you hear about them being there before school hours. So, is the rink open, at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning?
So, the rink is currently open from 5:30 a.m. to midnight.
Okay.
So that's approximately 17, 18 hours a day.
Is that 7 days a week?
7 days a week. And we will keep that same schedule now with the access to 2 full sheets of ice, which is approximately 266 hours of ice time available for all the residents to enjoy.
And then obviously daycare during weekdays, and then evening activities. In the gym, still on ice. What else happens inside on the evenings and weekends then?
We still about the current facility?
The current facility.
So on weekends, you have ice activity. I mean, from 5:30 a.m. to midnight, but the gymnasium becomes accessible because preschool isn't open on Saturdays and Sundays. So we do gymnastics in our gym. We do a variety of dance classes. Again, we host some basketball or open gym for the public to come in and enjoy. And so a lot of activity around the gymnasium on weekends. There's a lot of rentals for private parties that take place in the gymnasium. The new facility will have access to our gym all the time.
Okay. And then the existing facility, there's some additional multi-purpose rooms, which are mostly for daycare, and they get used a little bit when daycare is not in session, maybe for community meetings. That's what I've seen over the years.
Yeah. We can host community meetings after the daycare is closed, but you're utilizing the daycare rooms
right.
To host those current multi-purpose meetings or community meetings.
And there's no other rooms then available.
There's no other rooms available in the current facility.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right, so let's fast forward then to the new facility. Obviously, one of the biggest things we're adding, which doesn't exist, is a branch library. So Karen, maybe kind of orient us first with what we currently have. We have the main library downtown. We have a branch in North Evanston, and then we have the CAMS, the Chicago Main. I guess it was called the Mighty Twig at one point. I think it's just a plain old branch at this point. So those are 3 current facilities. About how many people do you serve currently in those 3 facilities?
We receive between 1,500 and 2,000 people through our doors a day. Our branches are open 5 days a week. The main library is open 7 days a week. And the new beautiful Robert Crown branch is going to be bigger than the 2 existing branches combined. So 6,000 square feet is a really nice sized branch. We also have an access to an exterior reading garden, and also adjacent to the new branch are 3 multi-purpose rooms that we're going to share programming with Parks and Rec and with others to make those spaces busy all the time. And many of the programs that our residents enjoy now at the main library and at the branches, we are going to bring to the new Robert Crown. So depending on the time of day, the feel of the branch will be very different. In the morning, we can work with story times for the preschool group. We can welcome senior citizens after school. Then we're hoping that the teens who are leaving ETHS swing by and do some maker activities or some coding activities, some digital learning, and their homework.
So there'll be computers at the new library?
There will be racks and racks of computers. So we'll have computers that are permanently affixed to a computer bar in the branch, but then we'll be able to roll out all kinds of laptops and Chromebooks for our residents to use. There's going to be a couple of new features in terms of access that I'm excited about. We will have a kiosk in the lobby where you can check out a laptop or a Chromebook and take that home with you. Right now we have use within the library, but we're going to pilot having people be able, with their library card, to check it out. Along with the hours where we have our staff there to serve you, we're going to be working with a relatively new to the U.S. It's been in Europe for a while. It's called Open Plus. So with a library card in good standing and with an agreement that you will respect the space, and there will be extended hours where the staff will not be in there, but you as a resident, you as an Open Plus member can come in if your computer dies or you're out of ink or you need to do some research or answer some questions. With our reference books, there will be extended ways for you to come in and use the service of the library and the materials.
So that's fascinating. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So normally a branch would close at what time?
Right now, our branches close at 8 on Mondays and at 6 on the other days when we're open.
Okay, so generally 6. So this idea would be from 6 to how late, would you think? I mean, the center's open till midnight.
Yes.
Right.
So would it be maybe that long, or would it vary depending on the day of the week? We're still working on it.
I'm smiling because we are having these discussions right now at our monthly board meetings, and if residents have ideas, we'd welcome them to come in. I know I'll never be able to staff our library from 5 a.m. till midnight.
Yeah.
We won't be able to afford that, but I love the idea of trusting our residents with their library and having that accessible to them for use for studying and for information seeking. So not only after the library is closed, not staffed, but also some earlier morning hours.
That's great. That's great. So obviously this is a new piece of Crown. Lawrence, talk a little bit about what now we're replicating. You've talked about sheets of ice, half sheets, full sheets. What are we going to get at the new center?
Well, one of the highlights is we'll be able to offer a new Take 2 class in our preschool. So just based on the current demand that we're currently having.
So we have to walk, will you be able to get to the gymnasium in the new Crown without walking through the childcare, or will you still have to wait until childcare is closed?
Yes, sir. You'll be able. The gymnasium will be affixed upstairs in the new facility, and it'll be accessible to the public from the time that the building's open to the time that the building is closed. And so we're excited about that. So that preschool class expansion, as Karen mentioned, this facility will have some 3 multi-purpose rooms that we will share along with our library partner, which allows us to do a multitude of programming as well, even if that is a makerspace or other ideas that we're currently discussing collaboratively. We look forward to that. Also, you're going to have a dedicated art room. We don't have that at the current Crown. We're going to have a dedicated fitness room that allows us to run a variety of new fitness classes, everything from Tai Chi or Pilates or yoga. We have that opportunity to do those things now. We're going to be able to offer programs to our senior population in that facility as well to take advantage of some of these new fitness classes. And again, gym access from 6 a.m. till the close of the building. And so we're excited about that. So we envision the residents being able to come into open gym for 6 a.m. for a workout, shower, and head off to work. And that open gym could either be open basketball or open volleyball as early as 6 a.m. throughout the week. We also look for, expanding leagues. There's a huge demand for adult league play, both basketball and volleyball. We now have the opportunities to meet those demands here in the community because of the access to the gym. Our gymnastics program, We have a lot of our figure skaters that's currently participate in it, but you also have those that don't figure skate. We'll be able to expand the hours of gymnastics now as well to kind of meet the demand of the community. So we're really excited about having just full capability of operating the facility from the time that it's open without the restrictions that we currently do.
So let me make sure I got this clear. So we're going from a sheet and a half of ice to 2 sheets of ice. We're going to 3 multi-purpose rooms from 0, right? Because we really can't count the daycare rooms, although
That's correct.
Sometimes we use the multi-purpose. So 3 multi-purpose rooms, an art room, which would be new, the gymnasium, more or less similar to what we have in the current building, but will be available all hours that the building is open. The library, of course. Now, is there some sort of running track as well?
It came to me after I stopped talking there. We were going to have, over one of the ice rinks, we're going to have a 200-meter indoor walking/running track inside. That's also will be accessible from the time that the building's open.
Right. So if it's 3 degrees and snowing and people want to get their walk in, they don't have to do a treadmill. They can walk around.
They can walk around the
one
indoor
of the sheets
track.
of ice.
Yes, that's correct. It's a raised track above the ice rink, and we're excited. I mean, it was one of the items that came out of our community meetings was some form of an indoor track, and so we're excited about that amenity as well.
And then outside, the plan is that once the building is constructed and open at the end of this year, we will then knock down the existing structure and we will put what in its place?
So in its place will be our 3 artificial turf fields and our new and the new parking lot. Those 3 artificial turf fields will, as I stated earlier, they will allow the programs of our program partners to really not lose playability. We have leagues that now have to sit for 48 hours after a rain, and so the fact that these new artificial turf fields will be there. There's no loss in league play. It actually gives us a chance to kind of expand our opportunity of play, and we're looking forward to that.
Great.
So, yes.
So we'll have a new building, we'll have new fields, we have to pay for it. And Erica, one of your responsibilities with this project has been to try to sort through the financing, how we pay for this. We're going to talk a little bit later in more detail about that. But there's been concern in the community about agreements that we're making with local community partners, contracts, letters of interest, MOUs for fee that there would be use of the facility. Can you talk a little bit about those agreements and what, in general terms, they'll be providing to those partners?
Sure. So, yes, I've been working with several entities in the community to craft these user agreements and also naming rights agreements. So 2 separate types of agreements. What we're really striving to do is 2 things. Make sure that there's a balance between the time that the facility is open to the public. We want to make sure that the community has a greater amount of access than they currently have in the existing center, while also allowing for time for other user groups to pay rental fees to use the gym or use the ice and other parts of the center. And the other part that we're striving for is to make sure that the center is economically viable and that we can bring in revenue that will give us a stable outlook for the future of the center, so that we are understanding what our revenues are going to be coming in over the next several years. So many of these agreements that we're working on are 5-year agreements, 3-year agreements, things like that. So it's taking a little while to work through with the different entities, but we've already approved 2 agreements. The City Council approved them last month. Those were naming rights agreements with Wintrust Bank and Valley Produce. So we're excited to have those partners on board and those naming rights agreements complete. I'm still working with Beacon Academy, Northwestern University, North Shore University Health System, and Chicago Young Americans Hockey to finalize their agreements. I anticipate that we'll be bringing those to the City Council in June for approval. And like I said earlier, we're really just striving for balance. So like Lawrence was saying earlier, the gym is going to be way more accessible to the public. And now we're going to have an entity that's going to be renting that gym 3 hours a day of the 17 hours a day that it's open during the school year, and then paying a usage fee for each hour that they rent the gym. So that's going to be helping us make sure that we have a long-term stable source of revenue for the center.
So we'll talk later about the sponsorship agreements more in depth, but let's talk about the user agreements. So you mentioned 3 with Beacon Academy, Northwestern University, and then a youth hockey association. So are those the 3 user agreements that you contemplate will have in place before the facility opens at the end of the year?
There's a 4th one too, Evanston Hockey. I haven't gotten that one quite there yet, but we're getting close. Most of these have been in the works for many years, and just take some time
Sure.
to get all the details and T's crossed, I's dotted, making sure that we get the best deal for the residents of Evanston.
So 4 agreements total for users agreements. So Beacon Academy, I think you mentioned Beacon Academy is a local charter school here in Evanston. They're looking to use the gym. Why don't you just talk in general terms about what kind of uses they're contemplating?
Yes, so the Beacon Academy is going to utilize the gym, like I said, 3 hours a day during the school year for their fall sports and spring sports. The rest of the year.
Is this 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, or would they have access on the weekend?
It's 5 days a week.
5 days a
5
week.
days a week. Yeah, I don't think they contemplate any weekend usage unless there's occasional games. But they won't be utilizing the space in the summertime. So basically from the end of the spring season until the start of the fall season, they won't be utilizing the space. And then we have Northwestern University, who does currently use the existing center. Their programming will stay the same. It will move to the new center. They have a club hockey team, plays about 8 or 9 games a year in the existing center. That will stay. They practice 3 hours a week from September until February. So that's not a lot of usage, I think, overall. Their games are double headers every weekend, so it's about 4 or 5 weekends a year, and then, like I said, 3 hours a week of practice time. So that's a pretty low impact use, but also a great partnership with them they're also going to be doing some digital literacy learning, some mentoring, a lot of programming with the youth. So they'll be using those multipurpose rooms in partnership with both Parks and Rec and the library to provide more programming for kids in the community to access during the rest of the time the facility's open. So that's very exciting. And then we have the Chicago Young Americans hockey team. They're a group that is paying a premium rate for the use of the facility, which is going to be great for us, like I said, to generate that revenue. They're going to be playing the same hockey season as everybody else, and they're also going to be having some tournaments, which will bring some people into Evanston for using the hotels and the restaurants. So that's going to be a great benefit for the community. And then the last one,
Evanston Hockey.
Evanston Hockey, yes, same programming as currently exists in the existing center, just moving over to the new center.
So of the 4 agreements, 3 are ice related and 1 is the gymnasium, correct?
Yes, and then Lawrence reminded me we also have some agreements that we haven't even started yet for the outdoor fields because those are still a year away from being utilized, so we haven't gotten started on those yet, but Evanston Soccer.
And those outdoor agreements would be largely with the folks that were current users, previous users before we started construction.
Correct.
So of the 4 use agreements, 1 is with the gym, so you're saying 3 hours a day, more or less Monday through Friday, so that's 15 hours a week. And Lawrence, approximately how many hours in a week do you think that gym will be available?
120 hours.
Okay, so we're committing to 15 hours out of 120 hours, and then the balance of that time would be other activities, either by ourselves, open gym,
That's
different
correct.
things like that.
That's correct.
The 3 hockey uses, 2 of which are current, the NU, so they would just continue the use that they currently have at Crown and Evanston Hockey, and then the Chicagoland group would be new to the center. About what do you think, how much, Lawrence, maybe I'll ask you this question, how much use all 3 of those together?
Percentage-wise, I mean, it's less than 20% overall. I trying to run the numbers here, but, it's not a lot of time because the majority of the time will be for the public.
Right.
But
And we have our existing programs,
and we have our
which would continue.
That's correct. No, there's no program being displaced or us losing it.
Right.
But as Erica talked about, it just gives us some consistent revenue for the new operations of the new facility, which is just as important.
So the gymnasium, obviously, there's going to be lots of opportunities to program that newly. We've talked about the multipurpose rooms, which will be brand new, some of which will be used with the library, and then the ice itself. How much new ice time do you think we're generating? Again, we haven't really talked about what the half sheet of ice is. It's sort of more of a training sheet.
Yes.
What kind of uses do you get on the half sheet currently?
So, so broom ball is probably the most popular thing on that half sheet, but it's limiting. It's really, you're depending on the skill level of your user. A lot of our users just prefer to be on the main sheet. Mm-hmm. So, younger children, your beginners could potentially utilize, and that's who utilizes more of the studio rink. The hockey guys kind of do a little warm up before they go to the main ice on there, just to get their blood flowing and get loose. But programmatically, it's just not an ideal situation with that studio ice. So having 2 full sheets of ice now allows us to truly program. I mean, we could pull the curtain on one of the rinks, and now you have a half sheet to do broom ball and do some half rink kind of activities.
So you could have figure skaters practicing on one half and broom ballers on another half with a curtain down the middle.
If that is what the demands require, that's correct.
So it sounds like we're picking up a lot of ice time. I mean, what in your, as the director of Parks and Recreation, what's your vision? I mean, what would you like, to provide the community from an ice perspective that we haven't been able to provide with all these other uses? What kind of new things do you look for?
Well, we've struggled the last couple of years with our speed skating program. And wasn't
there an Olympic speed skater who started here? What's his name?
Shawnee Davis.
That's right.
So we would really like to commit to getting our speed skating program up and running, as well as what's new and exciting for us. We will now be able to offer sled hockey.
What's that?
So sled hockey is where our members of the disabled community are able to sit on small sleds and play hockey.
Okay.
Our current facility is not designed and doesn't allow us to do that. The new facility will allow us to now support sled hockey as an existing new program. And so the fact that so vision-wise, that we can offer sled hockey to our residents here and really focus on our speed skating program, where we have such a rich history. We have an Olympic gold medalist who got his start here at the current Robert Crow. We're really looking forward to really focusing on trying to grow those 2 programs.
Great. My last question is about new community partners. Obviously, we're talking. There's going to be a lot of time that we're going to be looking to program. Let me ask both Karen and Lawrence. Who are you talking to? Who seems to be interested? Do we have anything in the works? And what are our plans moving forward over the next several months to reach out to perhaps new partners to either provide programming themselves or provide joint programming with them? Karen? Any thoughts?
We've been having community conversations, and we continue to connect with residents and small groups to learn what they want to see in terms of programming in their new branch library. So we're excited about welcoming the Latino community. We are excited about offering Sunday programs, family programs in English and in Spanish, and not only will the programming, many of the programs will be bilingual, the staff and the collection will be bilingual. So welcoming our residents, our Spanish-speaking residents, we're talking with different education-related groups and existing partners about bringing programs there, whether it's around digital literacy, early learning. We've continued to elevate our concentration on the preschool population and making sure our children are ready to learn when they enter kindergarten, but also looking at how we reach out to our senior citizens with digital learning, with memory cafes for those that are suffering with loss of memory and their caregivers, because often the caregiver population is not supported as much as it should be. Lawrence and I are talking with some existing digital learning for teens. So I want to mention that along with the 3 multi-purpose rooms that we share, there's a multi-purpose room within the library and 3 study rooms. So looking at how we support learning for all ages, tutoring, small groups, one-on-one learning is important. And we're talking with partners such as Center for Economic Progress that right now provides free tax preparation at the main library. I've asked them to analyze how many of their clients are residents that are more proximate to Robert Crown. So we may be moving some of our existing popular programs to Robert Crown for the convenience of our families, and certainly National Able, which does job training and job readiness, and they work with us in a space in the main library, talking to them about doing some job training and job readiness there. But it really is a conversation that's ongoing, and we'll experiment with programs and see what the response is so that our library is relevant, it's engaging, and it's serving the community. Transportation's an issue, and so being much closer to this area of Evanston will invite a lot of new families and residents into the library and serve them in a new way that's meaningful for them. And of course, I'm really intrigued with working with Lawrence and his team, the whole idea of developing mind and body together. So if a family comes and some of them are in the gym or on the ice, and you want to check your email, or maybe the little kids get fidgety and they want to come into the library for a story time, how we program and marry our programming to complement the rest of the facility to serve the whole family will be a lot of fun, and it's going to be a good time for everybody.
So, Wally, we will be hosting a community organization meeting here within the next month to talk to all of the community-based organizations here in town, to give them an opportunity to share with them the vision, let them get familiar with the plan of the facility, and to continue the conversations about how we can better partner and invite them into the new space. There are some very specific conversations going on, as Karen alluded to, around digital learning for teens and some targeted populations. But I think with our upcoming discussion, we'll be able to really have input or get additional input from our community-based organizations that are right here in the community. It will be a chance for them to understand and see how they can come into the space, utilize the space so that they can also provide better services and opportunities to our residents. And so that meeting's coming up in the next month, and we're looking forward to seeing how that meeting evolves into some very specific conversations and programs.
So to wrap up, lots of community conversation about this project. I became city manager in 2009. There were 15 years of conversations about a new Robert Crown prior to my arrival. 10 years has passed. We've talked 10 more years. Maybe if you could just, each of you, talk about how you see the new Robert Crown fitting in to our community. What specific needs do you see it filling? It's a big project. It's costing a lot of money. How do you think what we've proposed and what we've just been talking about the last several minutes, fits with that community need? Erica, do you want to?
Sure, I'll start. So one of the things that strikes me most about Robert Crown is that it is the most utilized community center in Evanston, and we're doubling the size of it. So the fact that right now this center serves the most people in Evanston, and now we're going to have twice as much space and twice as many opportunities, like that to me is what's the most exciting part about it. I see there's so much tremendous value in what they talked about, marrying the athletics and the mind-body wellness with the learning and all of the opportunities that are going to be available in that realm. So for me, I think that's what's most exciting for the community about this project, and the fact that there's going to be so many different options for everybody. We didn't even talk about the kitchen. That's one thing. There's going to be a community kitchen in the facility that we can do all kinds of programming for, culinary programs, local foods, things like that. Just tons of opportunities. So many that we forgot one. So that's part of what I think is really exciting about the project.
Sure. Lawrence, what do you think?
Well, I think for me, the most exciting part is the opportunity for expansion. We're so limited with the existing building, and both internally and externally. And so this new facility will really provide the opportunity to be a fully functioning community center from the time that we open those doors. And so regardless of all the new programs and everything that we're doing, we have a real chance to really have a huge impact in terms of thinking outside the box, doing new and different exciting things, because we are not limited to or relegated to a certain time frame. And so the staff and I are hard at work thinking about those. We're opening our door to all those conversations. And so we're really excited about what the expansion opportunities and the new programmatic opportunities that are going to be in this new space.
Karen, you get the final word.
I think that the new co-location of a branch library with a community center that already has a strong following lets us leverage the best of what each of us does and welcome new families and new residents in a way that is comfortable for them. Of course, we have books. We have hundreds of linear feet of books, but it's a library is a special place. A library is a service, but a library is a community builder. And so welcoming those new community connections, whether it's with a community of athletes or with our local residents, many of which are Spanish speaking, in an area of the city that we need to do as a library a better job of serving. And so this opportunity of a beautiful facility with partners that are existing and welcoming new residents, I think will just make that the place to be. It's going to be beautiful, it's going to be fun, and we can't wait to open it.
Great. Let me thank Karen Danzig-Lyons, the Director of the Evanston Public Library, Lawrence Hemingway, the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, and Eric Storley, the Assistant City Manager, for joining me on this first segment as we talk about the Robert Crown Project. Our next segment, we're going to go out to the site itself, and we're going to take a tour and get a sense of where the construction stands right now. So we're out here at the Robert Crown Center construction site, and I'm with Stephanie Levine, our Senior Project Manager for the project. Stephanie, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Well, we're going to take a walk through here. You've got some friends who are going to help us. Why don't you introduce them?
Oh, we do. We've got Matt and Jake here with Bully & Andrews. They work for our construction management firm, and they're going to help us get through the site today.
All right, well, let's go take a walk and take a look.
So this is the eastern facade of the building, and you're looking at the finished brick installation so far. Above this point, we're going to have glazing. There is more building to come just beyond this corner that we can see right here. We're waiting for that steel to arrive. It should actually be coming in later this week or next week.
Okay, so by the end of May, we'll see that steel will be coming in. And
that steel will be coming in. We'll start to see it get erected.
Okay, and then how far back will we see a building?
This actually is the furthest to the east the building will extend.
Okay, wonderful. Let's go inside.
This is the main arena rink, 85 by 200 in size, and then around the perimeter of it is going to be a running track. We're going to have some spectator seating that's just about ready to go in here. You can kind of see where this stagger steps down. That's where we're going to place all the bleacher seating. Up on the second floor, we're going to have offices, multi-purpose rooms, and some additional restrooms for the building.
They'll be glass and overlook
Yep, they're going to overlook the running track area and the main arena. This is the ice resurfacer area, so this is where the Zambonis are going to sit. This is kind of the back of the house of the facility. One of the Zambonis is going to sit kind of in this area. One's going to sit right behind where your camera's looking. And mostly this is intended for maintenance activities.
And then you scrape the ice off and then it gets dumped into a pit here?
Yes, it does. Yep.
So is this the same size rink?
Yes.
Size rink.
Yeah.
They're both the exact same size. This one's just not as much spectating seating
Okay.
as the other side. This is more meant for smaller games, practice room,
Yeah, exactly.
temp facility before you actually do your main events over in there.
Okay, great.
So along this main masonry wall here, there will be spectator seating with about 3 tier seats. Unlike how the other side, which has 1,000 seats, this is more around 200 seats.
Yeah, you can actually see where they've set up the line, I think,
Yep.
between where your walkway is going to be, and then behind that, that's where the seating is going to be. So it's much more limited in this rink, but the size of the rink itself is exactly the same.
So what's the seating in the existing facility?
The seating in existing facility is about 1,000,
About 1,000?
and we're replicating that essentially in the other rink.
Is it all on one side or is it on two sides?
In the other,
In this ring?
this rink, we've got 1,000 seats all on one side. It's all where you saw that kind of stepped,
Right.
graduated area.
The major difference between that rink and this rink is that in that rink, you're more looking down, looking into the ice. This one, the dashboard, you can walk right up to them.
Right,
So you're
okay.
looking at it eye level.
Great.
This is the changing room corridor. So we've got basically, I think there's 12 changing rooms, 6 and 6 on each side. There's some other, some additional rooms like for coaches' rooms and
Referees.
lace-up room and referee and things like that. But this is the main corridor that divides the two rinks.
We're back out here looking at Main Street here. So what's going to be here?
So this is the section of the building that hasn't really gotten out of the ground yet. This is the area that we're expecting to receive steel in the next week or so, and so you're going to start to see a building get erected here. You can kind of see the perimeter of it if you look at this concrete curb that surrounds it. This is going to be the library, the lobby, and the gymnasium space above. So this is a significant portion of the building that you're just about to see start getting erected.
And then the access to this part of the building comes from where?
Well, this is actually the main entry to the building,
Okay.
and it's pretty close to where that vehicle is placed right now.
Okay.
All right, so this is the reading garden area here. So this is going to house trees and landscaping and seating. That wall is the edge
Yeah.
of the building. And then this area, these are the preschool rooms here.
Okay.
So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms that are basically kind of formed out. And above this is the fitness room, the art room, some changing rooms as well. Quite a bit of activity up here.
Where are we going to put signage?
What kind of signage?
External signage.
So that's a great question.
Okay.
We're still working on that. We're talking about doing a few different things. First, we're talking about doing kind of an exterior, separately mounted sign, similar to what we have at Levy Center, maybe a little bit taller, a little bit thinner, that announces the building and has some scrolling text about things that are going on.
Is Robert Crown Center?
Yes, it's going to say Robert Crown Community Center. Really, the athletic fields are really going to start around here, around this line to the east, and they'll extend all the way.
All the way.
Basically, all the way, all through the entire property.
Through the existing building.
Through the existing building, through where they have these trailers set up. It all encompasses almost the entirety of the property.
How many fields?
We have 3 fields. One is sized large enough for a football field,
Yeah.
and the 2 others are just a little bit shy of that, but still very significant fields.
Lights?
They will be lit as well. We are going to put LED lighting in, and athletic lighting as well as security lighting will be here. So it'll be a modern sports complex.
And then this is more fields all the way to the...
Exactly. This is all part of the field, and this low area here that's a little bit wet, and those structures, those odd-shaped orange structures behind it, that's going to be our stormwater detention system. Those structures are going to get placed in these areas, and they will hold all the stormwater that runs off of this site and runs off of this building, and then they will slowly release it to the sewer system in a controlled manner.
But this is all artificial turf.
Correct. Yes, all artificial turf.
Stephanie, thank you for the tour.
No problem. Anytime.
All right, we're going to continue our program next with a segment talking about how we actually finance the Robert Crown Center. For our third segment, we're going to talk about the costs associated with the Robert Crown Center project, not only the costs associated with building it, but the costs associated with the paying off the debt that we'll be issuing for the project. And with me are three guests to help talk about that. First, Erica Storley, the Assistant City Manager. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you.
Laura Biggs, the City Engineer. Laura, you've been doing a lot of those project work. We'll talk in a minute about where we stand. And then also Hitesh Desai, the city's Chief Financial Officer.
Thanks.
So, Laura, let's start talking about the project. We broke ground last summer about where are we at and where are we headed over the next 60, 90, 120 days.
Sure. We're about 25% complete on the project. And where we are, we have poured the foundations for the buildings. We have put up the steel for 2 of the 3 segments of the main building. We call those areas B and area C, and they encompass the main ice rinks. We are in the process of building all of the concrete block walls that are the preschool room walls, the locker room walls. We have built the walls where the bleachers are going to be installed, and you can really begin to see this building coming together. Now, what's going to happen in the next few months, we are going to be finishing out the exterior of the ice rink portion of the buildings. We are going to pour the ice rink floors, which is a major operation.
So talk a little bit about that. So concrete, I imagine?
Concrete. It takes
a lot of it?
A lot of concrete. It's going to be about 40 truckloads of concrete. Each rink floor has to be done in a single concrete pour that takes about 8 hours and uses 40 truckloads of concrete. There is laser calibrated equipment to make sure that this floor is extremely flat. And so the first 2 hours, we will just be putting the concrete into the area of the rink floor, and then they'll spend 6 hours finishing the floor with the laser calibrated equipment.
So that's coming up over the next couple months.
Yes, the first pour actually will be in early July, and the second pour for the second rink floor will be in early August. After the floors are poured, we submerge them underwater to cure the concrete. It makes for a stronger, more durable concrete than it's typically done. And we actually cannot get on those floors for 28 days. We can't risk anything touching them.
Wow.
So that is a very intricate part of this. It's very exciting to see that we're getting to these stages. When you are inside the construction site, you can really begin to see how the whole building is coming together.
So as far as project schedule is concerned, we're still looking at being completed by the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yes, we are. We're looking at finishing the building portion of the project in November and having move-in during November and early December, and then having the building open.
So big question, how are we doing on the budget for the project?
We're doing okay. This is a big project with a lot of moving pieces, but Bully & Andrews, our contractor, has done a really good job of managing a lot of the costs, and we are pretty much right where we expected to be on the budget.
And so we'll finish the construction of the building, we'll open the building, and then in the spring, we'll do the second phase of this with the demolition of the existing facility then, and then the construction of the fields. Is that correct?
That's correct. We will be starting in January and February with the demolition of the existing building once we've moved out of that building and are fully operational in the new building. The artificial turf fields and the parking lot are actually going to be built where the existing building is, and so the demolishing will take a pretty quick time period, 6 to 8 weeks, and then we will be on with construction of the artificial turf fields and the new parking lot.
So a lot's been talked about, Laura, about the cost of the project. We have been working on this project. I've been here as city manager for 10 years. There was at least 5 or 10 years of community discussions about the project prior to my arrival. We've had lots of numbers thrown around. Why don't you start with what's the current project budget? How did we get to that project budget? How are we assured that we're not going to leave that? I think there's been concern about what the bidding process has been. So why don't we start there, and then maybe we'll work back.
So, 501 C3 bonds properly followed.
So folks, if you could sit down, we'll take the questions that you have until we can get the video fixed. If you don't sit down, we won't be able to answer the questions. We've got cards. We're going to go through the cards. Alderman Braithwaite's going to help me.
You read one card and you only read half of it, so can we be sure that you're going to...
That's why Alderman Braithwaite's going to help me with it. So if you could all take a seat, we'll go ahead. Yes, we're broadcasting right now. As soon as we've had for some reason, the audio is not getting out of the area. It's going out on the...
Moderate.
Before we get started, I guess I'm going to ask you all to kindly take your seats. Throughout this 2-year process, there's been a number of questions and concerns that have been brought up. 2 months ago, is this?
I believe it's going out. So we're having trouble with the audio in the
Right.
room, but it's apparently going out.
Right,
So
right,
we can
right.
see a monitor up on the screen there.
Right.
We'll just confirm that the audio is going
Right.
out. And Laura, can you maybe just go back and just
Right,
confirm that?
right.
You can hear our voices. We're pretty.
Yeah. So 2 months ago, as I mentioned, there were a handful of people during a regular scheduled board meeting that had questions about Crown. It wasn't, Mike, if you're gonna interrupt, then I'm not gonna compete with you. Right. So we're now eating into the 30 minutes, Mike. Are you gonna allow, or should we just wait for the time to expire? So again, in addition to the second one, there have been a number of questions that come by way of email, as well as phone calls to the aldermen, and clearly questions throughout public comment. And so 2 years of meetings, I can't even count the hours. There's a ton of information on the website, which I know is not easily accessible. And so the attempt of this evening was for the benefit of us, as well as new aldermen and new people that are now paying attention to the project based on a lot of the comments and questions raised, there was an attempt to put this information in sequential order that would allow people to be able to view it at their own pace to digest all the information. And so I realized that this format is a little bit brand new. I think the nice thing is, again, for a larger city, this is just one of many meetings, and then we'll go back through anyone else having questions. I'm sure you're going to continue to come to our ward meetings. You're going to continue to come to our city council. And I just want to thank those of you that came and sat and actually wanted to learn, because I want to do the same thing. So I'm going to start the clock right now, and I'm just going to randomly pick questions. I hope that all of you that had questions actually put them into the basket. If not, we're going to ask you again. No, it's okay. We can. This is where you self-manage. We're going to do this for 30 minutes, and if it's an argument.
We ask the questions ourselves. What is the problem with that, Peter? Why are you cutting
Why
off
is
our
there
voices?
control on
Why are you
community?
How are you going to have a discussion?
This is very new tonight.
What we have to say.
Peter, can I just correct one thing you just said, though? 'Cause
I'm ready to read.
The 30-some meetings that you guys keep listing, they have them listed on the city website. They're vendor fairs, they're meetings with architects, they're meeting with users of the Robert Crown Center. There was only one meeting that invited the general public, and it was the one you just had in February. So I just want to be really clear that there was one meeting where
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for your comment.
In this book is a copy of every one of those meetings on the website, and nowhere in this book does it say that this project is going to cost the Appleton taxpayers somewhere between $2.5 and $3.5 million. It says the cost, it does not say a year, and it does not say anywhere about that the funds are reducing their stated contribution of $17.5 million down to $5 million, and that then they're going to try to raise another $9 million over the next 10 years to help subsidize the $3.5 million debt. That is not in these books.
Thank you for your comment.
Peter, I'd like to know why you aren't representing and insisting that the residents here tonight have a chance to ask their questions. Why are you standing behind all of
Thank you. So the first,
Why are you not?
We'd like to try to answer questions,
Right.
please.
Okay, this is not democracy. Go ahead and read that question.
thank you. Thank you. So the first question is, Ms. Bobkowitz, and we also have our director of the Recs. We have a representative from our engineering. We have Karen Lyon from our library, and then Kate representing our CFO's office. Perfect. All right. So the.
Why you're representing Wally over the residents? Just answer that question, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question.
Will you answer
All right.
that question?
So this is several questions. All right, we'll do our best. The city has rushed the bond issuance and the construction schedule to accommodate donors. This has been done recklessly and irresponsibly and without transparency. They broke ground on a most expensive project in Evanston history without viable funding plan, no bonds in place, no legal relationship with a Friends organization, without public approval of this project as a priority. This incredibly expensive project, most of the money is for two NHL and Olympic-sized hockey rinks, has not even on the list of the city's priorities. Does any? Okay.
So I don't know if there was a question there.
Yeah, it's more of a.
That was just a statement.
All right, can we try another one?
Was there an answer to that?
There
wasn't a question.
Did you?
I heard an answer. Okay, it wasn't a question.
Right. So this is a question. Did Beacon offer write their own LOI?
So the letters of offer, letters of interest, we have worked with each of the individual organizations. Now the issue is coming up with an agreement, and the Beacon agreement is still in process. And so I think there's been interest of having those agreements available before the council approves them. We hope to have it on the council agenda before the end of June, and we'll have that on for that. The agreements are being written with the city and with the donors.
I'll do in the city manager. Are y'all able to answer that first question, yes or no?
There wasn't a question.
That's my question. There were two.
Well, let's repeat it.
There were two. Did you counter offer them? Did they write their own
So
the bond question, did you take it back?
I just put it back in the basket.
But we have someone who can find it for you.
Right. So we'll take the next one and we'll come back?
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
So, I mean, the bond issuance was scheduled a year ago, so we've done that according to the TEPR hearing that was held last spring. Been done recklessly and irresponsibly. We've had many meetings. We've had many public hearings. Everything was done legally. Broke on the most expensive project in the history without a viable funding plan. The city reviewed a funding plan in January of last year and signed off on that. No bonds were in place. No legal relationship with the Friends organization. Again, we've not had legal relationships with any of the fundraisers, so the Friends marked the first organization that we do. And without public approval of this project is a priority. Again, the City Council approved the project. Incredibly expensive project. We recently looked at the cost associated with the Glenview project and really were amazed to see how much this project really is in line with costs associated with this kind of work. So not incredibly expensive. It was not even on the list of the city's priority. I think they meant priority budget issues. Those were all operating, not capital. So that's the answer. So. You ready to move on to the next question? Thank you. What's next?
Mr. City Manager, our next question is, how much is private funding dependent on turf? And then the second part of the question is a more than 4.8 million increased stormwater detention and amount to infill for the replacing and depositing.
And disposal and
Disposal, yes.
So the private funding dependent on the turf. Erica Storley, the Assistant City Manager, will be here in any minute, and I think we'll let her talk to that. Most of the agreements are for inside uses, so I don't know that there is much private funding that's dependent on turf. The 4.8 for increased stormwater detention, Laura Biggs, our city engineer, is here.
I don't have the exact number, but it's not more than $4.8 million. It's less than that. So that would have to be a number I have to
Okay.
to research.
So, Kate, if we could just take a list of things we promised to get back with, we'll do an info sheet. And then the last was for replacing and disposing turf every 8 to 10 years. And Lawrence, I believe there's a recycle period. Is it 8 to 10 years for the turf? Come on up.
Fields should last 10 to 15 years.
10 to 15 years, and then at that point, new turf has to go down?
It potentially could.
Okay, very good. Next question?
That's my question, and that's my question. When Erica, or Ms. Storley said the other day, we could potentially reduce costs by not doing turf fields, but then many of the donations would have to be returned. So I know we're spending $4.8 million for the increased stormwater detention specifically for that project. Now, and I think another $500,000 for less cancerous infill. And then also the replacement cost. So what I'm asking is,
I'm not sure if that's a question.
are the donations that are for turf more than what we're spending in looking for cost efficiencies?
And again, I think that we're getting donations for the general project. I don't know that there's anything that's geared directly to turf. So, Kate, if you could make sure that when Erica comes in, we'll hold this question.
So,
The EPA, by the way, has been banned from using in Connecticut as being a toxic for its toxicity level.
Next question.
next question. Whose/whom original idea of this proposals was this?
Well, the project goes back. I've been here 10 years. It was 15 years in the making when I got here, so about 25 years. So I guess the project goes back about 25 years.
That's how y'all been planning?
Yeah.
Oh, that was
Next question.
Yeah, about
Oh,
25. I mean, there was a 2000, or was it 19? There was a maintenance study that was done before the year 2000 that indicated that the building needed to be replaced, and so it was at that point.
You did it from the beginning.
I've been it since 2009. So the project the discussion started with that. The city council was dealing with the civic center at the time and decided to focus on the civic center rather than Crown. And once the civic center issues were resolved, around 2009, 2010 is when we repositioned toward the discussions on Crown. So it's been at least 9 years.
Aren't you, Alderman Gregory, excuse me, quick question for you. Aren't you like on the council or a chairman of like the LEP program and the diversity?
Serve on.
Incentives that the companies are giving to the residents? You know, there's plenty of residents out here, ready to work.
Yep.
And I remember you were saying to me one time, that money, that when they don't honor hiring as a resident for labor, construction labor, right, union job, that goes to training.
It's all correct. It's all correct.
Whoa, show me something. What?
So I'm gonna, if you'll be patient with me and give me a few minutes to get through this, then I'll pull it up.
Pull it up?
Yes, and show you exactly where we're at. Okay, so the next question, this is a good one, Wally. Who gains from this project?
Everybody. We've got, it's the most heavily used community center in Evanston. As you heard or maybe didn't hear at the first part, we're expanding the number of hours available for community use. How many fold, Lawrence, would you say? The additional ice hours, the additional time for gyms. We covered all of it. Unfortunately, many of you didn't hear it. Would encourage you to go on the website. Approximately, what was the number of hours?
So,
Come on up. We can't hear you.
the operations. All right. So the operations of the facility, it'll be operating 18 hours a day. So from 6 a.m. to midnight. And of that time frame, if there is 3 hours for a particular group to utilize, the other 15 hours is for the public to utilize and for the city to program as we see fit. So you multiply, 18 hours over 7 days, I think it's 126 hours. If I got a group that's renting the space for 3 hours of the day, you still have, 105 hours for the week open to the public and to our regular programs.
And is that more than what we would currently do?
Yeah, well, it's more because of the limitations of the current facility.
How many out of the statistics are the Evanston residents in use of this ice cream and of the facility?
I have data of all our users, but I don't know that off the top of my head. I mean, we have thousands of people who utilize our facilities.
Thousands of people, how many are actual Evanston residents there?
I mean, I need to look in our database.
Residents are actually users of the ice cream.
And we'll take that as a question as well. Alderman Braithwaite, do you have something else?
Where we are, we have things.
What was it said about the impact of the uncertainty for those funding the project? I'm not sure if we can answer, but this one is, what was it said about the impact of uncertainty has for those funding this project about?
I'm asking Mr. Bobkowitz, what was it he said about how uncertainty affects people who are funding this project? He was speaking specifically about donors.
Sure. Actually, it was the bond issues. So we've already been to the market, and we've already have the bonds ready to be sold. They've been rated well. The deal that we were getting with the bonds have been very well. So we can say with the certainty moving forward that we're getting a great deal on the bonds. And so
I wanted you to reiterate what you said. How does uncertainty impact people who are funding this project?
sure, people want to know that the money that they're donating is going to a project that's moving forward. Really, the uncertainty was the bond markets. We were concerned that if the bond markets felt that this project was not moving forward or was going to be delayed some way, that our cost of issuance of the bonds would go up. We've been to the market. We've had them rated. The cost of issuance has actually been very competitive, actually a little bit lower than we thought. So certainty has shown us that we're getting a good deal moving forward with the bonds.
What you said was that when faced with uncertainty, donors would have to think if this was the best way for them to invest in the community.
And that's true.
That is applicable to the public who is funding the project. We have a lot of uncertainty.
I'm going to try to get
And again, we're trying to answer all these questions. We don't think there's any uncertainty. We think that we've been able to move forward with this project responsibly. We have private donors moving forward. As municipal projects go, this is a pretty spectacular one, and we're really excited about it. So, is there a next question?
Yeah, next question is.
We've got questions here.
Right.
We got a whole.
Right. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question. We'll answer the next one.
Sure.
I'm wondering, are you in compliance with absolutely all of the requirements of a 501c3 bond?
So we'll come to that.
And it's an easy answer.
Yeah.
We have bond counsel specifically to ensure that we are.
So yes or no?
Yes. Next
All right.
question.
So the next. So the next question. Beacon's contract said its funding is contingent upon being able to cancel that funding at any time with 6 months' notice. How stable is that funding?
We do not have a contract with Beacon yet.
Okay, next
The
question.
agreement that funding is moving forward, the project that's moving forward.
What's the next question?
Next question.
Funding. What are the
I will.
terms?
I'm just being respectful for those that submitted, and then we'll come.
We want to know the terms.
And we're 20 minutes.
20 minutes in, right. I got it. Almost through. So the next question is, when will staff be arguing interests of the general public instead of only those donors and city corporation of friends? Is it? I'm not understanding.
The city council has voted to move forward with the projects, voted to the funding. My job is to implement the direction of the council.
Right. That is not my question.
Okay.
Next question.
I'm asking, when staff is advising council on its decisions, the interests that it is representing have not been anything about the public. It has been about donor interest, the fact that we ordered a Zamboni, whatever. I don't ice it a lot.
There's to be lots of extra time, so maybe we can help you.
So I'm going to move on to the next question. So the next question is.
I don't actually have lots of extra time. That's why I came here, and I would like you to answer that question.
So the next question is.
Oh my God!
Who?
Why are you even here?
Sure. I'm just going by what was submitted. So the next question is, who is at the top of the city's organization chart? Click government on the city's website.
Well,
Who's
we've
it?
got different kinds of org charts. Most of them have the people, then the city council, then the staff. I think we have at least one city staff org chart, which has a city manager at the top, but we all work for the residents, and the council's elected.
Exactly where to go. When you click government, it's here. Residents at the top.
Yeah, that's the organization chart. Yeah,
Thank you.
residents.
Thank you.
Then that's great.
Thank you.
Next question.
Next question. I think this may be recycled, so I'll keep moving on. It is, what are the terms of all funding contracts that this project is currently moving forward on?
And we have, the council has already approved a handful of them. The balance we hope to have before the council before the end of June.
Okay.
That is not the answer to that question.
Right.
And we actually covered all that in the video. So if you'd like later on to watch the video, and the video will be posted. What's the next question?
The next question is, explain in detail how the cost went from 20 to 30 to 50 million.
It's in the next segment.
In the video. It's in the next segment. Okay. The next question. Thank you. The next question that was written by someone here, number one, all of the donated funds are collected. From where will the rest come from? So after all the donated funds are collected, from where will the rest come from?
Sure. That then becomes a general obligation of the city of Evanston. It'll be a collection of fees and charges at the center, as well as the general revenues of the city.
The budget specifies it comes from property.
And actually, we're going to get into how much your taxes may or may not go up in the next segment. Because we have a full.
Right. So the next round of questions are any jobs offered to young African American residents?
Well, this project is covered under the local employment program of the city. We have a requirement. Laura, can you help me with the LEP requirement? So this project is required under LEP to have specific jobs for Evanston residents. Is that correct?
Yes, so our ordinance is applicable on this project. It requires 15% of the construction hours to be to Evanston residents. It is race neutral. It doesn't address African Americans specifically, nor does it address male versus female. The contractor, if they do not meet that, will be subject to the same penalties as any other contractor on any project over $250,000.
How much is that off the top of your head? Would they be penalized?
We'll have a report on that.
I don't know the exact number. I mean, they are.
So Kate, hold on a second. I want to make sure we don't lose this.
Do you think that's fair?
So Kate, we just need to also post what the penalties are if the MWBE requirements aren't met. Okay. Will programs be affordable to low-income families? Lawrence, maybe you can come up and help answer that. Currently, the programs that we have at Robert Crown are available. They're any individuals who would like to participate have the ability to do that. I don't know what more else we can add.
I mean, I'll talk a little bit about the scholarship.
Sure.
So currently, all of our programs residents are eligible for a 50% discount if they qualify for our scholarship. Our scholarship is if the family qualifies for free or reduced lunch. It's just that simple. If they do, then the resident is eligible for a 50% discount off the current fee.
And currently, how many of the ratio percentages do you have for scholarships for the hockey and for the other programs that you offer?
I mean, I can't speak for every program is different. So for that question, let me go back in. I gave out almost 3,000. We had about 3,000 families last year that took advantage of the scholarship program, but they were from various programs. So once again, I said I don't know specifically for that facility, but we gave out over 3,000 scholarships last year.
Let's get that information specific to Robert Crown, and we'll get that information.
Right. So I was just informed by staff that the video is ready, the sound is ready. We have about 5 minutes left in the 30 minutes, and we'll keep on going through. The next question is, these agreements for private funding were executed in 2017. It's being presented as already in place. Why are there only...
Why are they only being presented to council immediately before they need it for the project?
So I think the important issue here is the difference between the letters of interest and the agreements themselves. So the letters of interest, some of them were back in 2017, but we now need contracts. And so many of those contracts have not been finalized, have not been before the city council. So when they will.
Moving forward without
Sure.
having it in place.
Hold on, Peter.
So,
Can you answer one of these?
sure, yeah. So here's what I'm going to respectfully ask. So if there's balance, you're, no.
These are the salient questions of the evening, and you're not asking them.
Would you like to listen?
Would you like to?
Ready?
Would you like
So my response
Excuse
to
me?
you is this. It's okay. It's okay.
Would you like to listen?
It's okay.
Would you like to
My
respond?
response to you is, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so the second half of this video, just by reviewing some of these questions since they weren't addressed before, will most likely be addressed. And what I would encourage you to do is, at the end of the video, are we open to fielding?
We could
stay as like
we could stay a little longer.
Perfect, perfect. So if your specific question is not being addressed by the video, then we'll make sure that we'll identify them. So do you want to go ahead and get started, and then we will come back. We'll come back at the end of the presentation, and we'll address your questions. Thank you all. Thank you.
America?
Thank you.
Laura Biggs, the city engineer. Laura, you've been doing a lot of those project work. We'll talk in a minute about where we stand. And then also Hitesh Desai, the city's chief financial officer.
Thanks.
So, Laura, let's start talking about the project. We broke ground last summer about where are we at and where are we headed over the next 60, 90, 120 days.
Sure. We're about 25% complete on the project. And where we are, we have poured the foundations for the buildings. We have put up the steel for 2 of the 3 segments of the main building. We call those areas B and area C, and they encompass the main ice rinks. We are in the process of building all of the concrete block walls that are the preschool room walls, the locker room walls. We have built the walls where the bleachers are going to be installed. And you can really begin to see this building coming together. Now, what's going to happen in the next few months, we are going to be finishing out the exterior of the ice rink portion of the buildings. We are going to pour the ice rink floors, which is a major operation.
So talk a little bit about that. So concrete, I imagine?
Concrete. It takes
lot of it?
a lot of concrete. It's going to be about 40 truckloads of concrete. Each rink floor has to be done in a single concrete pour that takes about 8 hours and uses 40 truckloads of concrete. There is laser calibrated equipment to make sure that this floor is extremely flat. And so the first 2 hours, we will just be putting the concrete into the area of the rink floor. And then they'll spend 6 hours finishing the floor with the laser calibrated equipment.
So that's coming up over the next couple months.
Yes, the first pour actually will be in early July, and the second pour for the second rink floor will be in early August. After the floors are poured, we submerge them underwater to cure the concrete. It makes for a stronger, more durable concrete than it's typically done. And we actually cannot get on those floors for 28 days. We can't risk anything touching them.
Wow.
So that is a very intricate part of this. It's very exciting to see that we're getting to these stages. When you are inside the construction site, you can really begin to see how the whole building is coming together.
So as far as project schedule is concerned, we're still looking at being completed by the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yes, we are. We're looking at finishing the building portion of the project in November and having move-in during November and early December, and then having the building open.
So big question, how are we doing on the budget for the project?
We're doing okay. You know, the This is a big project with a lot of moving pieces, but Bully & Andrews, our contractor, has done a really good job of managing a lot of the costs, and we are pretty much right where we expected to be on the budget.
And so we'll finish the construction of the building, we'll open the building, and then in the spring, we'll do the second phase of this with the demolition of the existing facility then, and then the construction of the fields. Is that correct?
That's correct. We will be starting in January and February with the demolition of the existing building once we've moved out of that building and are fully operational in the new building. The artificial turf fields and the parking lot are actually going to be built where the existing building is, and so the demolishing will take a pretty quick time period, 6 to 8 weeks, and then we will be on with construction of the artificial turf fields and the new parking lot.
So a lot's been talked about, Laura, about the cost of the project. We have been working on this project. I've been here as city manager for 10 years. There was at least 5 or 10 years of community discussions about the project prior to my arrival. We've had lots of numbers thrown around. Why don't you start with what's the current project budget? How did we get to that project budget? How are we assured that we're not going to leave that? I think there's been concern about what the bidding process has been. So why don't we start there, and then maybe we'll work backwards to try to explain how we got to that cost. But let's talk about the costs currently and how are we assured that we're going to be as close to budget as we can.
So the current cost of the project, the overall project, including engineering, construction, buying furniture, everything that goes into making a new park for the city of Evanston, is actually around $53 million. That includes, as I said, a lot of money that's actually already been spent on engineering and other things. There was a fundraising help that we did for a while. And so we are right in target for coming in at that $53 million level. Now that includes $3.2 million of engineering and $47 million construction contract with Bully & Andrews.
So was this the typical low bid contract, or did we go through a different process to establish all this?
We went through a different process. We used a request for proposal in order to get to where we are today. Part of the reason we did that is when we do our normal process of hiring a contractor, we get a low bid, and we are obligated by state procurement laws to accept that bid as long as that contractor has met a minimum amount of qualifications. Robert Crown is a very large project with a lot of moving parts, and our concern was if we went with that, it is not uncommon for us to have several problems on every single construction project we deal with, just because the contractor, in preparing the low bid in order to get the work, has already cut corners prior to even starting work on the site. We didn't want to be in that situation. This is a building that's going to last a very long time. It's built on a tricky site in the middle of a residential area, and we wanted to build it with as low impact to the residents as we possibly could. We also have a number of city programs that were really important to us to incorporate, making sure that we could hire Evanston residents and local businesses to participate in the project. And for that, we felt like we really needed to have a contractor that could demonstrate their, not minimum qualifications, but they were highly qualified to do this kind of work and this kind of construction. So we went out with a very minimum design, almost what would be considered a schematic, where we sort of just put bubbles on a plan site and said, here's where we want a building to be. Here's where we want the site to be. And we had some narrative description of how the building was going to be constructed, what kind of materials were going to be used. But it was a very general discussion of what this building would look like. And we received 9 proposals from contractors that really demonstrated what their qualifications were. The proposals varied wildly in terms of how the contractors looked in their capability to participate, but we received 5 very good proposals. We moved forward. We had interviews with those contractors. We really grilled them on how they build a project, how do they hire people, what's involved in it, what other projects have they done, what experience do they bring to the table. And from there, we selected Bully & Andrews as a contractor that the city has worked with in the past, that Northwestern has worked with in the past, that's really demonstrated their commitment to Evanston and has proved over and over again they can build a quality facility.
So a quality facility, but also one within certain budget parameters, correct?
Yes. If you look at Northwestern, they are an agency that a lot of residents in town are not overly fond of, but Northwestern has built a lot of buildings in recent years, and they've stuck to some very tight budgets. And so working with Bully and Andrews, there was an example right in town of a project that was highly complex that they had done recently for Northwestern, and they kept to the budget. But not just that project. They demonstrated multiple projects and provided references for many different organizations they'd worked with to provide this kind of service.
So buildings underway, buildings being constructed. You just kind of described, how we got to that point and how we move forward. So let's kind of turn back the clock. We've been talking about this project for a long time. There have been many dollar amounts bandied about what the project would be. What was kind of the first dollar amount you think that was discussed publicly for the cost of this project?
The project's been discussed so long, it's hard to pick where we got really serious and we got right to the point of what we're doing today. However, in the 2011 to 2014 and 15 time period, the mayor at that time, Mayor Elizabeth Tisdall, and the aldermen really settled on a goal of $30 million that they felt this was the goal they would try to construct this facility for. Now, this wasn't a price that was based on estimates. In fact, previous iterations of the project, the city had received estimates, maybe not for the same building, but for similar facilities that were actually higher than this $30 million number. But that number was set as a target that we were going to try to meet, and we moved forward. We actually went forward with hiring an architect through late 2016 and early 2017. And in 2017, around July, the architect issued a cost estimate for the project after they'd had many group meetings with stakeholders, including aldermen, really determined what the community needs were and what we were going to include in this facility. In that 2017 cost estimate, we were up to $46 million. So at that point...
And then, I don't mean to interrupt, but the $46 million then, the project started to look like the project that we actually have under construction. I think there was a lot of discussion about the sheets of ice. Where were we going to have 2 full sheets of ice? Where were we going to have a sheet and a half like we currently have? What kind of multipurpose rooms would there be? The size of the gym? So all of those things started to finally shake out with that estimate that you just mentioned.
Absolutely. At that point, we were really trying to define exactly what facilities were going in. But what had also happened is we had gone from only looking at a building that was going to be really something all-encompassing and useful to the residents of Evanston, but not looking at the site. And Robert Crown is actually a lot more than just a building. There are a number of sports that are played there. In the current iteration, we have tennis, we have soccer, we have football, we have baseball and softball, all played on that site. But those facilities, because of the way we were going to be constructing the building, and also because they had deteriorated a lot and were no longer meeting the needs of the residents of Evanston, it was decided that the whole park would be addressed as part of this project. And so we really began to look at the exterior of the site and start to finalize some of those details. Although in 2017, we had actually not worked out all of the details.
So that number in 2017, $46 million, and that was largely the building.
It was the building and beginning to talk about some of the site issues, but we had not finalized all of the site.
So let's talk about the site. So is there problems with the site? Were there issues with the site that we had to address?
There are issues with the site. Some of these were known, but the extent of them were not known. And one of our big issues is the soil on the site. It's very poor bearing capacity. It's a type of clay that is really difficult to build anything on. You're going to see settlement over long term. And also, it simply does not drain water. It holds water. And one of the issues we have on the current Robert Crown site is that the fields flood and then they stay flooded. So we were really beginning to wrestle with how do we deal with the poor, unsuitable soils on our site. We have one site that was very well defined about where we were going to be building this building. And so it wasn't an option to just pick up and go somewhere else. We had to face the challenges we had and come up with solutions.
So $46 million, did we go from 46 to 54 in one step, or was there an intermediate step?
There was a little bit of an intermediate step in that we hired the construction manager, Bully and Andrews, and they began to price out the project. Oh, let me go back. when we went to hire the construction manager, we had given a number of construction companies our schematic designs and a discussion of what was going to be included in the site and in the building. And those construction managers, in their proposals, gave us a price of what they thought it would cost to construct. Now, they had a fraction of the information. There were no detailed plans drawn. We hadn't picked floor finishes or determined what kind of equipment was going to be in the building. We hadn't even fully determined how the extent of the artificial turf fields that were going to be on the site. But they came back with a number, an average number of around $48 million. So we already knew that our $43 million or $46 million figure was maybe not as ideal as we hoped. We were getting an indication that things were going to be more expensive than we would have preferred, but we knew that if we were going to build a facility in today's construction world, dealing with the unsuitable soils, dealing with the needs of a wide variety of residents, that these were the numbers we were going to have to face.
And so we went then, what was then the last step? How did we finally then get to 54? Was just the refinement of the issues that you just talked about? Was there anything new added or big things subtracted?
Well, we went forward with Bully and Andrews. Their first assignment was to actually take our drawings and develop detailed cost estimates of exactly what was going to be built. And based on working with subs, actually getting numbers. But now at this point, we really had detailed soil information. They began to look closely at how to value engineer the foundations. There were draft numbers that actually came in higher than what ultimately was determined to be a overall $53 million project. But through a value engineering process, we were able to come up with better and more appropriate ways of dealing with our stormwater, looking at how we can put in foundations on what's a very challenging site. Also dealing with some regulations that, as we were really bringing a lot of engineering firms on board as subconsultants to do detailed design, we were finding that there were some interpretations and things like stormwater regulations that the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District has that were increasing the size of stormwater detention far beyond what we expected we would need. So as we did the final cost estimate prior to getting a guaranteed maximum price, it was coming in at $53 million, but it was incorporating a lot of additional information that was getting filled in as we were doing detailed design.
So we have a price. We move forward with the price now. Hitesh and Erica, we got to pay for it. Maybe it's worth just taking a minute to talk about how these kinds of projects are generally funded in the past. So we've done a large library, probably was the last project we did. My understanding is we just, at that point, just issued debt and paid for it. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of those previous projects.
So we didn't have, there was some fundraising that was done, but there was not a significant amount of fundraising. There was no public-private partnership. So it's a normal thing that when we're building a building, regardless of the size and magnitude, that's something that just comes from the general tax dollars of this city or any city, correct?
Correct.
So when we're looking at this project, maybe we start with you, Erica, and figuring out how to pay for it. What were the first steps? Did we try to find a community partner first? Did we just decide we were going to pay for it all? What's some of the history here?
Sure. So before the city embarked on this project on its own, there was an effort to try to go out and get a public-private partnership,
right,
where we were seeing if there was an operator out there who could build the facility and operate it in conjunction with the city. The city went through a tremendous amount of effort to go down that road and see if that would be beneficial to the residents of Evanston, and ultimately it was found that it wasn't economically viable. So at that point, everybody returned to the drawing board and said, that's not going to work, we need to figure out a different way to do things. And that's kind of where this idea came to see if there was community support that would be able to fill in the gap. So the city decided to hire a fundraising consultant to determine if there was capacity within the community to fundraise enough to support operation or the building and construction of a new center. So at that point in time, the city hired CCS Fundraising. They did a market study, determined that there was some capacity, and at that point in time, they thought that the community could raise anywhere between $3 and $4 million that could go towards the project. So at that point, the city proceeded with a contract with them to work directly with the newly created 501c3, the Friends of Robert Crown, so that in conjunction they could try to raise money for the center.
So let's stop there. Friends of Robert Crown. Talk a little bit about them. How do they fit into all this? Why do we need a 501c3? Why couldn't the city just ask people, please write a check, City of Evanston?
I think that part of the reason that the Friends of Crown were created was that it's just not a typical thing for anybody to just give money to their municipality. They feel that they pay taxes and they pay for services, and so when people are at the end of the year thinking about their annual giving, just giving money to the city isn't something that they think of. But when you have an entity like the Levy Center Foundation or the Friends of the Parks, or in this case, the Friends of Robert Crown, that entity is really able to go out into the community and talk about the reasons this project is beneficial to the community, what types of opportunities there might be, and for naming rights and things like that, and do basically a fundraising effort that can supplement what the city would also be paying for this project. So the Friends of Robert Crown was established, and in partnership with the fundraiser that the city hired, they embarked on a fundraising campaign. So we had the
and the fundraiser that the city hired really was then what people were interested in directing its money to this project to direct it to the Friends of Robert Crown.
Absolutely.
But there was never this. Well, the fundraiser was going to have the money come to the city. The city was using or has been using the Friends of Robert Crown as sort of an agent on our behalf to do this. So there's been some community discussion about the role of the fundraiser. All the time, the fundraiser has been paid for by the city. And that's concluded at this point, correct?
Correct. The fundraiser was here through the end of 2017.
And then since then, the Friends have either been doing their own fundraising or the agreements, the interest that was developed has been going through the Friends.
Correct.
So where is the Friends with their fundraising? There's been a discussion about an agreement with the Friends. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about where we are with some of the other agreements that we're having with individuals and with groups?
Sure. So the Friends of Robert Crown and the city has signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, basically establishes guidelines for how the Friends will continue pursuit of fundraising. It's our hope and aspiration that the Friends will continue to flourish as a fundraising entity for decades to come. I mean, the center will have maintenance needs over time, and any additional support that the community can provide would be absolutely appreciated.
Well, and we have good examples of that. You've already mentioned the Levy Senior Center Foundation. They have continued to provide support on an annual basis for the Levy Center. The Evanston Environmental Association, same thing, where they raise money for the Ecology Center. The Noise Tenants Association raises money through their rent and other payments to support noise. So this is not an unusual thing. Not every center we have has this, of course, but this is certainly not unusual, is it?
No, not unusual at all. Fairly common, especially in our city and in other cities across the nation. And because of the support that the Friends of Crown were able to provide in terms of the fundraising, right now they're at a little over $12.5 million with a goal of $15 million. That drastically reduces the amount of the project cost that will directly impact the taxpayers of Evanston.
So we're looking, again, $12 to $15 million coming from the Friends. There's still a delta there. And so I think that takes us to Hitesh Desai, our Chief Financial Officer. Okay, Hitesh, private fundraising is a good thing, but we need additional dollars. We need them up front. We went to the bond market. Why don't you talk a little bit about how we've gone to the bond market, how the bonds were issued initially, or the authority came from a TEFRA hearing. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that, and then how we've issued bonds.
Right. So obviously, yeah, I mean, the total project cost is around $53 million. Erica has touched on that. The Friends of Robert Crown, their pledge is around $15 million. Out of that, they have like $12 million in pledges, and they're going to give some money. So what we were planning that the last year we issued the bonds in the amount of $25 million as the first phase of that. And we wanted to wait until how the construction goes, how the Friends raise the funds for the second bond issue, which is upcoming later this month, and which would be for the $15 million.
But even before that, what was the process that the council did to approve?
Right, absolutely. So yes, when we issued the bonds in 2018, obviously this was issued as a 501c3, and Erica touched on that why we had to issue 501c3 bonds, because some of those entities were getting something in return for the donations they were giving to the Friends of the Robert Crown.
Okay, so that's an important point. So there's different ways a municipality can issue bonds. It can issue them as a 501, C3. And we did that because it was not just a pure donation that folks are getting something in return. And Erica detailed in our first segment, I think pretty specifically what some of these organizations, what all the organizations that we have been talking with are getting back in return. So I don't want to interrupt, but I think that's an important point.
Absolutely. And so that's why we had a TEFRA hearing, which is required under the IRS rules whenever you issue the 501c3. So that gives the residents an opportunity, to express their concerns, and the city gets an opportunity to why we are going through this route.
And when was this again?
This was the bonds were issued last year in August of
Okay.
2018, and based on the advice of the bond council, we went with the TEFRA hearing. It went well. The council adopted the bonds ordinance, to issue the $25 million as a project fund. After we looked at it, we sat down with Lara's team, how the construction is going, talked to Erica, how the fundraising going from the Friends at Robert Crown, and we decided that we might need around $15 million bond issue for this year. So later this month, we have a closing of the bonds on 16th of May. The sale of the bonds on 16th with a closing on June 10th. So, and that amount is $15 million for the bond.
So with the approval that came in 2018, the council had what's known as a TEFRA hearing, a tax-exempt financing hearing. The first issue of bonds in 2018, the second issue of bonds in 2019. Did that then generate enough revenue through those two bond issues to pay the bills that Lara and her team are racking up for the construction? So we have that money we're paying. About how much are we spending a month at this point?
We've been spending about $1 million to $1.5 million a month, but we are getting to the point where we will be going around $4 million to $5 million a month for a few months.
Because in addition to the construction, we're also going to be doing furnitures, fixtures, equipment costs. We bought a Zamboni not too long ago, so those are additional costs. So we've got the money that we've issued through debt in a bucket, and we're paying off the costs for the construction of the building, and then the demolition of the existing building, and then ultimately the construction of the fields. So then we'll open it, everybody will be happy, it'll be a beautiful, wonderful facility, but the real question then is how do we pay for it? So Atesh, why don't we start talking about how we pay for it? So we had a payment, our first payment on the debt will be due this year, correct?
Correct.
And,
So-
and what's that payment that I think is December 1st?
Right, December 1st, 2019, we have a first interest payment on the last year's bond, which we issued in 2018, of around $998,000.
Okay.
And then for the next few years, for the 18 bonds, the amount remains the same. And for 2019 bonds, these are the estimated numbers, since we haven't sold the bonds yet, the payment would be around $664,000.
Okay, so about $1 million, for all intents and purposes, $1 million.
Correct.
So do we have that $1 million in the budget for 2019? So when December 1st comes, you're able to write the proverbial check to pay that first payment?
Absolutely.
And how did we do that? Did we have $1 million laying around?
No, as a part of the budget process, the council went through the various options, and we looked at the thing too, and we had some raise in the property tax, which would cover the Robert Crown, as well as to recapture the Washington National TIF, which expired in 18. So we would have enough money with us for the payment of debt service due December 1st, 2019.
So a phrase that I use is baked in, and I think the definition of that, I think, is that $1 million is now part of our budget. It's ongoing expense built into our budget. So unless we make a change, that $1 million is there. So as we look at debt service, that first $1 million is baked into our budget. It will be part of our base budget in 20 and every year moving forward.
Right,
but you're saying that for next year, as we work on the budget for 2020, we're going to need, about another $600,000?
Right, another $660,000. And then again, as we get into the 2022, that's when the principal amount starts for both the bond series, 2018A and 2019A, and which would be another $1 million. So if you look at the most average annual debt service starting 2022 would be around $2.6 billion.
Okay, so $1 million in 19 we've got covered. In 20, it's $1.6 million. So we're going to, through the budget process, have to identify additional $600,000. 2021 then is when we start paying principal, correct?
No, 2022. So
okay, so
1.6.
So 2021, No change.
No change.
So 1.6 million in 20, 1.6 million in 2021. Then in 2022, we start paying principal, and that's another $1 million,
Correct.
which will take it to $2.6 million. And that stays steady for about how many years?
The last payment is December 1st, 2043. So it's kind of a level.
So
payment.
once we, again, using that term baked in, once we bake in $2.6 million, then that's where it will be in the budget. We won't have to look for additional dollars. However, the council has decided to make those decisions, it'll be there.
Right.
So
I'd like to jump in just for a
You
second
bet.
to talk about the Friends of Crown donations and how those will be applied to those annual debt.
So that's not included in it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So as Tesh said, the additional money is 1.6. We've allocated the Friends of Crown donations in two ways. We've taken $6 million of the $15 million that they're raising and put it directly towards construction. So $5 million of that we'll receive in the next month directly towards construction. We'll receive another $1 million next year directly towards construction. But then we have $9 million that we can apply towards the debt. So what we've tried to do is apply those payments starting in 2022 to 2028 to smooth the payments over time so that that 1.6 million that you referred to stays the same until 2029, which we'll see our next jump.
Okay.
So about $1 million a year from Friends of Crown for approximately 9 years keeps the payment the same, basically from 2020 to 2029 when we go up to 2.7.
2.6, yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that once we get to 1.6, that we'll be able to leverage the Crown dollars to keep the general fund, let's say, portion of this at that 1.6?
Correct.
Okay. So the council could make other decisions. We can't predispose that. We'll have to get the $1 million from somewhere. And we feel confident that for that initial period, we can have that $1 million come from the Friends of Crown donations, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. So where do we get the money, Hitesh? There's been a lot of discussion about what's the plan, how are we going to get the money. I mean, we have to come up with a plan every year. I mean,
Right.
the general fund is what, a little under 80-odd million dollars, depending on the year.
I mean, the general fund budget is around $115 million. And city council.
When you double count pensions and all that, all right.
Right. City council could consider the other options too, besides the property tax. I mean, we have a strong other major revenues like sales tax, income tax, the other home rule tax revenues like athletic tax and amusement tax on the liquor tax. So city has the option to consider, whether to use any of those revenues or dedicate any of those revenue stream for the payment of the Robert Crown, or just go with the property tax, or any combination of the several.
Or we could cut expenses.
Correct.
But the order of magnitude we're talking about, certainly looking at 2020 for the impact of the 2020 budget from Robert Crown for the debt service is $600,000.
Correct.
So let's say the council just wanted to say, okay, property tax, we're not going to deal with anything else you've just described. We just want to do property tax. What kind of increase would be required on our share of the property tax, which is without the reassessment, in the 17-18% range of the entire. So for every dollar that a resident of Evanston pays on property tax, 17 cents, 18 cents
Right. So
goes to the city of Evanston.
And you're right. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the city share, it's only 16%.
16%.
If we add the other pieces to the library, general assistance, then it comes close to 20%.
Okay.
So, but if you look at it like 2018 levy, which was around $1 million, which we are going to pay in December, that resulted in like a 1.98% increase to the property tax. In 2019, we would add another 600,000, as I said, so that would be around 1.31%.
Okay, so let me stop you there. So if the council just wanted to say, fine, we're just going to use property tax, it would be a 1.31% increase to the city's, did you say 15% of this, the general levy?
I mean, yes, total 16% CD and 19% including library and general.
So 1.3% increase on 16%.
Correct.
Okay. So but the council could say we're going to raise other fees or charges, we're going to cut expenses, that's $600,000. That decision has not yet been made. My job as a city manager is to present a budget that's balanced. We have no choice. We sometimes have deficits going into a budget process, but by the end of the budget process, we have a balanced budget.
Cool.
So it's $600,000 for 2020. If we find that there's no change in 21, correct?
Right.
And then in 22 and beyond, our plan would be to use some of the Friends of Robert Crown dollars to level off that final $1 million increase that we would need to have. Is that correct? To make sure we're all on the same page. So we have a plan. It's a matter of working with the City Council over the course of the next several years as through the annual budgeting process to decide what makes the most sense. Last piece of the money, I think, is operations cost. So we have a group of staff that are operating the existing Robert Crown. All those folks move across the parking lot, so to speak, when the new building is done. Erica, have we done any kind of estimation of what it might be, what additional costs for operation there'll be?
Yes, we have. So we've been going through the numbers, trying to project out our future revenues. So as we talked about earlier, the new center is roughly twice the size of the existing center, so it will require additional staff to operate. But with that additional staff and having that much more square footage, there will be additional revenues to accompany it. So right now we're looking at the center bringing in an additional $1 million annually in revenues.
And where does that come from?
Additional rentals of the gymnasium, the ice rinks. Certainly it's easier to sell a full sheet of ice for an hour than it is to sell a half a sheet. There's more demand for that. That's where the market is right now. So that's part of it. And then we're able to expand the preschool programming, so there'll be an additional classroom space every day for an additional preschool room. And then, of course, we have a lot of revenue that comes from summer camps, programs, classes, arts, gymnastics, all of that.
So we're not talking taxes on Evanston residents. We're talking about fees for service.
Usage fees.
That individuals, groups, families would pay in order to access the service.
Right. So the staffing plan right now has some, I think, approximately five. These are still working through the numbers, but additional FTEs that would be needed to operate the center. But like I said, roughly twice the size, so 5 people.
And how many are there now?
I think there's 15, and we're going to potentially go to 20 full-time FM.
And that would be part of the 2020 budget?
Yes. I mean, some of those people we may need to add on towards the end of this year so that they can learn how to operate the infrastructure. I mean, it's a very complex building. There's a lot of mechanical parts, and having some staff that are getting on board earlier and watching the center finish being constructed will help them be able to know where everything is to operate it properly. So there may be a small budget amendment that might be needed for the fall, just to add on a few people before we open the building. But largely, those fees or those increases for those staff will come from the 2020 budget. But they will be offset by the increases in the revenues that we'll be seeing. So.
And in the earlier segment, we went through the organizations that are, and I don't think we need to recover that. So I think in summary, it's a big project. It's an expensive project. Laura, I mean, you've been working on this project for how long?
I've been working on it for 3 years solidly.
So, what's your sense as to why the change? I mean, we started, as you mentioned, the City Council set a $30 million goal, which was sort of a dollar amount, not a programmatic goal. Is that right?
Yes. I think there are really 2 reasons for it. One is that there really are some site challenges, and there's some economic challenges. Construction is booming right now. It's been booming for years. And so costs have gone up over time. That $30 million number has been out there for 5 to 8 years at this point. And things have just gotten more expensive to build. But I think the other part is when we went into the community and we said, what are the needs of the community? It turned out there were some very serious needs that were not being met. A basic one, which may or may not have had a big impact on the cost, is making sure that the new Robert Crown Center is just fully ADA accessible, that the programs can be inclusive to people that have mobility issues. That was a really big change over what was originally talked about with the project. That might just be a small cost to incorporate, but there were a lot of needs and demands. And I think that when we look back 5 years from now, we will look at the center and wonder how we got by without these facilities. This will be really transforming to the community.
And then Hitesh, obviously you worry about the whole city budget, not just Robert Crown. Full all funds budget for 2019 is what?
The total of all is around $335 million.
Okay, so $335 million, general fund about $115 million.
115, right.
I joked about double counting pensions, and I think it's
Yes.
important people understand that that's an accounting issue. We're not paying twice. It's just, we have to account for it in two places. So our general fund went up significantly a few years back when we had to start double counting the pensions. So there's a lot of wherewithal in this community. We receive revenue from all types of sources as a home rule community in Illinois. We have the ability to tax and have taxed a whole variety of things. We've baked in $1 million. I mean, in my 30 years of working, I've never had in one budget had to find $1 million just to put in. Have you had to ever do anything like that?
No, man.
And so, that we were able to do that, with some pain, certainly, and the discussions. What's your sense about our ability to make up that, what will be $1.6 million over the next 4 years, to get to an additional $1.6 million baked into the budget? What's your sense?
I mean,
of that?
I'm positive that looking at the strong tax revenue base and even some of those potential expense reductions, so the way we did it, and obviously we can talk about even adding $1.5 million towards the reserve for the general fund.
Yeah.
So obviously we have that kind of cushion. So definitely, we can take $600,000 and provide for that in the upcoming budget.
Right, without really having a burden on people. I think when we talk about property taxes, it's always a complicated discussion, but the reality is that the portion of the property tax the city of Evanston receives is relatively small, and so any adjustment that the city makes to the property tax is certainly an adjustment. Dollars are dollars, but on a percentage basis, on a ratio basis, it's still rather small. So I think we work hard, all of us, to make sure that the budget is as small as it can be for the city, and I think the council's been extraordinarily responsible in looking at both revenues and expenses. But I think the orders of magnitude we're talking about is not going to lead to massive changes in how we operate the city of Evanston.
Right, and I don't see that. You are absolutely correct there. I don't see any major fee increases or service cuts, or how we deliver the services. So, I mean, we can definitely,
And we think of the capital projects that the city is committed to over, let's just say, the last 20, 25 years. Certainly the new main library comes to mind as a significant project. We've invested a lot of money on the lakefront. That was now 7 or 8 years ago that we invested a lot of money of infrastructure on the lakefront. We continue to make investments in existing facilities. The general capital program, general fund capital program is approximately every year?
We sell $9 million in bonds for capital needs every year, and then we have other funds, so we're usually running around $30 to $50 million in capital.
So it's a regular thing for us to make investments, but certainly the Crown project, I think many people have called it once in a generation. I mean, it's probably once beyond that, because certainly our hope is that this is a 2 or 3 generation facility once all is done. And I think that the revenue raising, we haven't even talked about the money that's been set aside for a maintenance fund. I think one of the challenges we've had with our facilities over time, and Laura, you deal with this every day, is the amount of money that we need to maintain buildings. We look at the Civic Center, we look at the fire stations, we look at police fire headquarters, the other community centers. We have a big inventory of facilities, and we've done a generally okay job of maintaining those over a long period of time, but it costs money.
And I think one thing that really has gotten lost in the discussion is because we've discussed doing something at Robert Crown for so many years, decades at this point, we have not invested any significant capital dollars in Crown since at least 2000, maybe earlier. So during that time period, we've invested millions in each of our other facilities. It seems like a big ticket item all at once, but had we been able to do these investments over time, it still would have been the same amount, and you would not have ended up with this brand new center that is much more able to meet the needs of the community.
Well, Thank you. I think we've had a very full discussion. Hitesh Desai, the city's chief financial officer, Laura Biggs, the city engineer, Eric Storley, the assistant city manager. It's our hope that these segments talking about operations, talking about financing, and taking a tour of the facility kind of helps better understand the challenges we're facing with our Robert Crown Center. Thank you all. Thanks to Karen Danzig-Lyons and Lawrence Hemingway, who joined us earlier. I'm Wally Bobkowitz, the city manager. Thank you. So it's about 9 o'clock. We've got probably half an hour more that we'll finish answering the questions that were submitted. So Alderman Braithwaite, if you want to continue to help. Erica Storley, the assistant city manager, is here. There was a question. Erica, we did half an hour. We had a little technical difficulty. It talked about the $4.8 million increased for stormwater detention and the amount for infill. Misty, I think that was your question. She's right here.
You mentioned at the other meeting that when you said, not really turf fields would be a possible cost reduction, but that we would use many of the donations. So I'm asking if you can quantify how many donations, how much of that, those private donations are state or dependent, contingent in any way on the turf funding, and if it's more or less than the increases in credit.
Good evening. All of the donations that have any sort of usage tied with them are contingent upon the entire park and facility being built as described. So the project that was approved by the City Council is the project that must be built, or any of the $12 million could be needed to be refunded back to the donors. So there's not a way to quantify how much of that would be specific towards the fields, because they were all sort of structured in that way.
So I understand that, but there are only two term funding agreements. One that has anything to do with field use. One is from the soccer group, and one is from Beacon. Now, the turf fields are not addressed in the LOI so far for Beacon. That only remains the soccer association, which is part of $150,000 pledge shared with a sister or mom. So, but the way you presented that proposal made it sound as if that, say, $75K superseded the $6-7 million that we spent and will spend in cost increases for them.
I think I understand what you're trying to say, but what I'm trying to say is that the memorandum of understanding with the Friends of Crown, which governs up to the $15 million or more that they raise, the entirety of that money is contingent upon us building the park and facility as described in the attachment to the MOU, which is 3 turf fields.
But those agreements aren't finalized yet, so we do have time.
No, the MOU has been signed by all parties and is in effect.
With
So you're saying a hockey group really wasn't concerned, was only using the ice rink with turf fields?
Friends of Crown is not a hockey group.
No, I'm talking about the MOUs. Like the private pledges, friends might care about there being turf fields, but the individual pledges may not.
We've got a lot of questions more to go. So I've got so in the name of transparency and public accountabilities, do you want to just do that? Okay. Is that, okay. We'll just go through the list that was submitted. On behalf of the LOIs, so Erica, the documents will be available. We still have several that the council's not acted on, correct? And so the question is that these be available for public review and feedback before presented to City Council for approval and action before the next scheduled phase of construction begins. Well, I think the construction is going to continue, but the agreements before they are before the council, I think the last time was it a week ahead of time before?
Yes.
So we are committed to do that again. The second question here, all payments or repayments from private entities for rental or use of Robert Crown must be removed from the Friends of Robert Crown's list of so-called donations and accounted for properly as public revenue for use of space. So I think what we've tried to do on our website is as the donations are made, we can be as complete as possible. So, I don't know that we can tell the Friends of what to do as far as donations. Ultimately, it's a combination of donation and fee for service. I think we can commit to make sure that on our website that's as clear as possible. The fundraising commitment of the Friends as of December stated 17.5 for construction, not for debt service. We expect the Friends of Robert Crown to uphold their published commitment of $17.5 million toward construction. City Council took action to proceed with this project based on that $17.5 million commitment. Calling a payment for rental time a charitable donation is a deceptive practice. Again, this is all a statement. Next question, why would the city agree to a construction contract with Bullion Andrews, which came in nearly $10 million higher bid than Walsh Construction? And Laura, I think you covered that a little bit in that last segment of the video, but why don't you just go ahead and speak to that?
Walsh Construction was looking at a very schematic design with a minimum amount of information, then providing a price that they were in no way obligated to honor. During an initial request for proposal, as we interviewed them and questioned them about what was included in their price, the selection committee, which included a number of people, not just myself, really thought that their answers were vague, and it appeared that they had not considered a lot of things that were important to the city and were considered integral to the project. And because they seemed to not be able to demonstrate the same understanding of the project as the other people that were interviewed, they were not selected.
The next question is...
highest on your list, correct?
The next question is, the city paid $800,000 for a fundraiser, Michael Happ. I'll let you deal with this, for the Robert Crown project. Michael Happ's final report stated that he had raised $10,252,000 for the project. Where is the money? Where are the copies of those pledges? So what's that next step? There were funders identified, and now those pledges are being materialized to the Friends of Crown. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. All of the pledges that are in support of the project are directed to the Friends of Crown. So initially, before the Friends of Crown had set up their bank account and gotten their 501c3, the city started collecting the donations. I think there was maybe 6 or 7 checks, maybe $20,000, $30,000 that came to the city. But after they were set up with their full nonprofit status, those funds were transferred to them, and all future donations that were raised by Michael Happ in conjunction with the Friends. He was hired for the sole purpose of raising money and establishing a group called the Friends of Crown that could continue the fundraising once we were no longer paying him. Those funds were directed to the Friends of Crown. So we have received the first $5 million of those donations. We got that money last week, and then we are going to get, like I said earlier, $1 million next year, and then the remaining $9 million in years to come.
So is this...
Before you have a formal legal relationship with Robert Crown, you have the lawyers, you transfer money before a legal relationship is established.
True.
All right. So we're going to list all of the Friends are listing all of the donations individually, or we'll be doing that on our website. How are we going to handle that?
What's the question?
So the copies of the pledges, who are the signers, a lot of money for taxpayers for a fundraiser. Give us a detailed account of the money that Mr. Happ raised for the city of Evanston. So that's now actually the pledges that are being converted into donations at the Friends.
Correct.
And so that's listed on the Friends website, our website, on the Friends website.
All the donations are listed on the Friends website. The only thing that's on the city website is entities that the city has established a relationship with for usage agreements or naming rights.
Okay.
Northwestern is listed on there, and Northwestern did not give a donation. We were told directly from Mr. Davis that this is not a donation, that they paid Friends of Robert Crown 2 years ago $330,000 for use of the ice rink. That should have been given to the city. That was not a charitable donation. They've made that clear. They've written that, and they've stated that. So you're not actually providing after facts on this.
Okay.
So what do you say to that?
I'll say what I've told you before, and that is that the usage agreement with Northwestern is still being negotiated. They use about 25 ice time.
Let her finish would you please let her finish? Go ahead, Eric.
Yes. So while we are continuing to negotiate with Northwestern, we are working on a usage agreement for them for their ice time. They are a current tenant in the facility. They will continue to be a tenant. They have no plans to increase nor decrease their ice time. They use about 3 hours a week from October until February. Right. So the payment is for a portion of ice time, but then they're also going to be subsidizing public skate so that they. Yes, the remaining $770,000, whatever it is, will also go to the Friends of Crown as a donation.
Next question. The residents deserve to know how many other agreements are in the work with private entities. So you mentioned earlier in the video that unfortunately some folks in the room didn't hear. Can you talk about the other private entities that we're still waiting on?
Sure. So we're still working with other entities who are going to be using the facility. We talked about Beacon Academy, Northwestern, Evanston Soccer, Evanston Baseball, and then Chicago Young Americans Hockey, and North Shore Hospital. So those are the ones that we're still working on. We hope to have a majority of those agreements to come to council in June, and then anything remaining sometime after that. But we're working.
I only came back here for 2 reasons.
The next question, number 6, in 2017, we can either conclude right now. Okay.
No, from Erica.
All right, folks, we're really sorry that Mr. Vasilko's keeping us from finishing all of this. So.
I'd like to put you on record on that because we've been told totally opposite from.
Yeah, no, we're okay. Sir, if you sit down, we'll finish. If you don't, Mr. Vasilko will be the reason why you're not getting answers to your questions, okay? All right, question number 6. In 2017 and 2018, the city turned over money to the Friends of Crown, a private organization. So explain again. You've already talked a little bit about this. I think I don't know that we need to cover anymore. Question 7, were the procedures for using 501c3 bonds followed properly? The answer is yes. This inquiry has been made to the city by residents, but the response to the inquiry was entirely redacted. Has the city violated any 501c3 bond ordinances? The answer is no. Question 8, the city has rushed the bond issuance. We've already answered that. Northwestern has stated their $1 million is not a donation. We've already talked about that. Number 10, has the city hired and paid Bill Stafford tens of thousands of dollars to oversee the Robert Crown project? So help me remember, Mr. Stafford came, I think, let me try. Okay. Mr. Stafford came to us in January of 2018 after Mr. Lyons had left. He helped us devise the financing plan and the bond distribution plan. He worked for us for 30 days as a contractor, 45 days, because I think there was additional time. Do you recall how much we spent?
No, but I'm sure the audience can tell us.
Okay, so was it tens of thousands of dollars?
It was
15,000? Okay, I don't recall that. Kate, if we can double check that and make that available. Mr. Stafford had any additional role with this project? No, other than he comes by and says hello from time.
He had many responsibilities during that time period, one of which was this project.
Okay, but after that 30 to 45 days, he's not been involved with the city on this project in any stretch for anything.
Hired a CFO and we've moved forward.
Okay, great. That's those 10 questions. Let me see what else is here. We've talked about that. We talked about that. We've talked about that. These are all just the things we've just gone through. What was it you said about the impact of uncertainty? We talked about that. We've already answered all these that are already typed out. Why has your office not responded to Misty Wittenberg's questions? I don't know if there's any additional questions that Ms. Wittenberg has, but okay. Well, I'm happy to have you all talk when we're done. And Tesh is on at a conference this week. We've talked about that. Why can't we hold public comment at this meeting? We've been doing that. Who gains from the project? We've talked about that. Original idea we've talked about. Funding creative financing, Northwestern alumni. Certainly, if there are any alumni listening this evening that would like to donate, we're at 2100 Ridge Avenue, Evanston, Illinois, 60201, and we'd be happy to take your dollars. Evanston rates 7th in the country for highest impact of property taxes on housing costs. It's more than 30%. What impact does this have on affordable housing? Well, I think anytime you have a tax burden, it's going to have an impact on all housing. So, as we've talked in the video this evening, the city's percentage of the property tax is, depending on how you slice it, between 18 and 20% of that. So anytime there's an increase, it has an impact. So we have not. And then in the name, we've already talked about that. So I believe we have answered all the questions written.
I have questions on the terms, the funding, that's baked into the presentation.
The terms of the private funding, so those will all be part of the agreements that the City Council will continue to review. So they're not approved yet.
But they're already baked into the family financing, is that correct?
We are assuming that they're moving forward, yes. All right, so I think that...
I'll just close them off.
Okay, and before Alderman Braithwaite closes, I just want to recognize the staff that's here who's done an excellent job. Erica Storley, the Assistant City Manager, Laura Biggs, the City Engineer, and again, Laura, what a tremendous job you did answering the questions. One of the reasons we did the video was to allow for the complete answers, and I think everyone can agree that Laura's answers were just tremendous. Kate Lewis-Lakin, our Budget Coordinator, no video appearance by Kate, but thank you for being here tonight. Karen Danzig, Library, the Library Director, Lawrence Hemingway, the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, Patrick Degnan, our Communications Manager, Anderson Castillo, Video Operations Specialist, and I think that's all. So, Alderman Braithwaite, would you like any final comments?
Sure, thank you. And I guess just for those that are still here and those that are listening in the audience, our City Manager, you've already acknowledged the staff.
You ignored that question.
Wally, I just want to, on behalf of the members of the council that are here and on the members of the council that are not here, including the mayor, we just want to thank you very much for your leadership on this project as well. You've already named all the directors that are here late at night. Director Hemingway, Lyons, Storley, Laura Biggs, Kate. On behalf of our city council and the residents who support this project, really and truly from my bottom of my heart, I say thank you very much for your hard and dedicated work on this project. Honestly, thank you. And so, as I wrap up, and we'll be here, I think like coming into this meeting, for those that are paying attention, and will rewind and listen to this video, it's clear coming into this meeting that you've had a number of families and individuals that have been supportive of this project. To date, we've had over 1,000 residents have contributed millions and millions and millions of dollars. In addition to that, we have some residents who will watch this video, and I hope that your questions will be answered. I really hope that your questions will be answered. It's difficult as someone who serves on our council as well as our staff when you have to answer repeated questions, and sometimes those questions are not full of the facts. So moving forward, I'm going to encourage those of you who have additional questions to please take the time and watch the video, and then hopefully your questions will be about what the details that were addressed by our staff moving forward, and I think that that'll be productive. And then for the other group, and I want to be careful how I choose my words, who have the passion and tenacity that actually brought us here to this meeting, there's an anger in this crowd that is somewhat painful, because for whatever reason, you're here. And I would share and invite you the combat. There are so many other issues that I could redirect that aggression towards. But again, I would encourage you to go through the video, and hopefully your questions will be addressed. So again, City Manager, I think now is a good time to end. I just want to acknowledge the members of council that are here. Alderman Ravel, Ruth Simmons, Alderman Rainey was here earlier, Alderman Nguyen. I received text messages from the mayor, Alderman Wilson, and others who wanted to be here. So thank you again, Wally, for taking the time. And there will be other meetings, I'm sure. Thank you, sir.